What if one storm could erase everything you've built in a single night? What if years of savings, memories, and security were gone by morning, swept away by wind and water? And what if this nightmare wasn't rare, but a recurring reality for families living in Florida's hurricane corridor? For many Floridians, this is not a hypothetical, it's lived experience. When a hurricane makes landfall, the destruction is not gradual. It is sudden, overwhelming, and absolute. Entire neighborhoods go from bustling communities to fields of rubble in the span of a few hours. People who went to bed with roofs over their heads wake up to collapsed walls, flooded living rooms, and the grim realization that life as they knew it has ended. The human stories behind these storms reveal the raw, unfiltered truth of disaster. Families describe the terrifying hours of howling winds, when every creak of the house feels like the moment it might collapse. Parents huddle with children in closets or bathtubs, praying the walls hold. The power goes out, the windows rattle, and outside, unseen, trees crash and debris hammers against homes. For those hours, survival is the only focus. Then comes the morning, and with it, the devastation. In the aftermath, survivors speak of silence. No birds, no cars, no hum of electricity, just broken wood, shattered glass, and floodwaters carrying away pieces of people's lives. Family photo albums float down streets. Cars are overturned. Businesses are gutted. Some residents walk through what's left, stunned and disbelieving, trying to comprehend how so much could be lost so quickly. For many, the word they use is simple: everything. Insurance, when it exists, provides only partial relief. Policies have deductibles so high that many families are left paying for repairs out of pocket. Others find their claims denied. Still others had no insurance at all, forced to risk everything because premiums were too expensive. Aid arrives eventually, but rarely fast enough to meet the immediate needs of food, shelter, and medicine. Volunteers and neighbors often provide the first lifeline, showing that in the worst moments, community resilience is what carries people through. But for those who have lived it, the trauma lingers. The fear of the next storm never fully leaves. Children flinch at thunder. Adults track every weather report with dread. Some rebuild, driven by determination and love for their community. Others cannot face it again and leave for good, carrying only memories of what was lost. At Crisis Lens, we bring you these stories not to shock, but to illuminate what is truly at stake. Hurricanes are not abstract, they are human, and the people of Florida live on the front lines. To hear their voices, to understand their loss, is to understand the urgency of our time. These storms are getting stronger and the risks greater. The question for all of us is, how many more nights like this can families endure? If you want to go deeper into the real experiences of those who have lost everything in a single night, stay with us. Subscribe to Crisis Lens, share this story, and join the conversation about resilience, survival, and the choices we must make in the face of growing storms. The voices of Florida matter, and through them, we see our shared future. When Floridians talk about hurricanes, they rarely describe them as distant weather events. Instead, they tell stories etched into memory. The roar of the wind like a freight train outside their doors, the walls shaking as if the entire house were breathing, and the sickening moment when the roof gives way and the water rushes in. These storms are not statistics to them. They are nights of terror, mornings of shock, and long months of trying to rebuild lives that feel shattered beyond repair. The experience of losing everything in one night begins long before the storm makes landfall. It starts with warnings. First a tropical depression, then a tropical storm, then the dreaded words, hurricane watch, hurricane warning. Television and radio repeat the updates, neighbors board up windows, and highways clog with cars heading inland. For those who cannot leave, whether for financial reasons, family obligations, or lack of transportation, preparation takes on a grim urgency. Plywood goes up, sandbags are piled, water is stockpiled. Every action carries the weight of uncertainty. Will it be enough this time? When the storm hits, there is no mistaking it. The pressure drops, the winds rise, and the world outside transforms into chaos. Survivors describe the sound as unlike anything else on Earth, a deep, relentless howl that drowns out every other noise. Rain hammers sideways against walls, sometimes forcing its way through cracks and seams. Debris smashes against doors and windows, and even sturdy homes seem fragile under nature's assault. Hours drag on like days, punctuated by moments of terror when something heavy crashes outside or when the building groans under the strain. Families cling together in bathrooms, closets, or hallways, hoping their chosen safe spot will actually be safe. Then, as suddenly as it began, the violence stops. The eye passes over, offering an eerie calm. Some step outside and see devastation already unfolding. Trees snapped like twigs, cars overturned, roofs torn away. But the stillness is brief. The second half of the storm arrives, often worse than the first, and those who ventured out scramble back inside. The cycle repeats until finally the winds fade and the storm moves on. The morning after is when the full weight of loss becomes clear. Survivors step outside to landscapes they barely recognize. Entire streets are gone, buried under piles of wood, shingles, and twisted metal. Floodwaters cover everything, sometimes waist high, sometimes higher. The smell of gasoline, sewage, and salt fills the air. For many, their homes are no longer homes, just shells filled with mud and debris. Some find everything gone in an instant. Family heirlooms, photographs, clothes, furniture, even the basic structures of daily life. Survivors often describe the feeling with one word: emptiness. For people who lose everything in one night, the emotional toll can be as devastating as the physical destruction. There is grief, not only for lost possessions, but for the sense of safety that disappears. Parents worry about children who wake crying at the sound of rain. Elderly residents struggle with the trauma of displacement, unable to return to familiar spaces. Many report nightmares, flashbacks, and the overwhelming fear of the next hurricane season. The storms do not only destroy buildings, they leave psychological scars that last for years. Economically, the consequences are staggering. Without insurance, rebuilding is almost impossible. Yet even with insurance, the process is fraught with obstacles. Policies have deductibles so high that many families cannot afford repairs. Claims are often delayed or denied, forcing survivors to navigate complex bureaucracies while living in temporary shelters. For those in low-income communities, the losses can be permanent. Mobile homes are destroyed beyond repair, and with little savings, families cannot replace them. Jobs vanish as businesses are swept away, leaving entire communities without income. The cycle of poverty deepens, and storms become turning points that trap families in hardship. But within these tragedies are also stories of resilience. Neighbors help neighbors, sharing food, clearing debris, and offering shelter. Churches, schools, and community centers become lifelines, providing not just supplies but emotional support. Volunteers arrive from across the country, reminding survivors they are not alone. In the darkest nights, human solidarity becomes the one force strong enough to counter nature's fury. Survivors often speak of gratitude amidst loss, the gratitude of being alive, of still having each other, of finding kindness in unexpected places. The choice of whether to rebuild or leave is among the hardest decisions survivors face. For some, leaving feels like surrender. Florida is not just where they live, it is who they are. Their families are buried there, their memories tied to the land. To walk away is to abandon identity itself. For others, the trauma is too much to bear. They cannot imagine enduring another storm, another night of terror, another morning of loss. They pack what little they can salvage and start over somewhere inland, carrying with them the pain of exile. Generational divides often emerge in these choices. Older residents, tied by history and culture, are determined to stay no matter what. Younger generations, burdened with rebuilding and raising children, sometimes choose to leave, unwilling to subject their families to the same risks. These tensions play out in communities across Florida, reshaping demographics and altering the state's future. Government aid, while essential, often falls short. FEMA and state programs provide assistance, but the process is slow, and many families wait months for the help they need immediately. In the meantime, they rely on donations, charities, and the goodwill of strangers. The inadequacy of aid forces a harsh reality. In many cases, survival depends less on official systems than on personal networks and community resilience. Yet even amid the devastation, many survivors speak of renewal. Hurricanes strip away not only homes but illusions. They force people to see what matters most: family, community, survival. Possessions can be replaced, but loved ones cannot. For some, the loss becomes a catalyst for re-evaluating life priorities, for finding strength they did not know they had. for building bonds that transcend disaster. In their stories, hurricanes become not just agents of destruction, but also moments of profound human clarity. Still, the broader question lingers. How many more times can families endure this? Climate change promises stronger, wetter, slower-moving hurricanes. The risks are rising, and the losses mounting. Florida's future may be one where nights of terror and mornings of devastation become not exceptional, but routine. Without systemic changes, stronger infrastructure, affordable insurance, sustainable planning, families will continue to lose everything in single nights over and over again. The human voice is the clearest testament. A mother recalls clutching her children as water rose around their beds. An elderly man describes standing in waist-deep water, watching the only home he ever owned crumble before his eyes. A teenager remembers walking through streets where every house was flattened, feeling as if the world had ended. These voices cannot be reduced to data points. They are lived truths that reveal the real cost of stronger hurricanes. Florida's story is America's warning. What happens there will echo across coastal states, from Louisiana to North Carolina, from New York to Texas. Hurricanes do not care about politics, borders, or debates. They come with wind, rain, and surge, and they leave behind silence, rubble, and grief. For the people who survive them, the question is never abstract. It is immediate. How do you rebuild when everything is gone? How do you carry on when your world is washed away in one night? These stories of loss, resilience, and struggle are not just Florida's story. They are humanity's story in a warming world. And as storms grow stronger, more of us will face the same haunting reality that everything we depend on can vanish overnight, leaving us to decide what survival really means. For the people of Florida, the phrase "lost everything in one night" is not a metaphor. It is the way they describe what it feels like to wake up to a home destroyed, a neighborhood unrecognizable, and a life forever divided into before the storm and after. Hurricanes are not only meteorological events, they are human tragedies, reshaping communities, economies, and identities. And while much attention is given to the science of storms, it is in the voices of survivors that we find the deepest truths about what it means to endure such loss. In towns up and down Florida's coast, these voices tell remarkably similar stories. A family in Naples describes how, after hours of relentless winds, the roof peeled away and water poured in, drowning everything in the living room. A retiree in Panama City remembers standing in his kitchen as the walls buckled, realizing in an instant that the house he had spent decades maintaining was gone. In Key West, a small business owner recounts how her shop, her livelihood, and her dreams were washed away in a storm surge she had been assured would never reach that far inland. These stories are not exceptional. They are the norm after a Category 4 or 5 hurricane slams into the state. The losses are not just material. When a storm takes away someone's home, it also erases the security, stability, and memories built within it. Children's artwork, wedding albums, heirlooms passed down through generations, all gone in a single night. Survivors describe the grief as overwhelming, akin to mourning a death. It is the death of a place, of familiarity, of certainty. And yet life demands they carry on. They salvage what they can. They sift through rubble for anything recognizable, and they begin the long, grinding process of recovery. But recovery in Florida has become increasingly complicated. Insurance, once a lifeline, is now failing many families. Premiums have skyrocketed, and companies are withdrawing from the market. Some survivors say the second disaster begins after the storm, when insurers delay, underpay, or deny claims. One homeowner in Fort Myers recounts how she fought for over a year to get a fraction of what it would cost to rebuild, living in a camper on her own property the entire time. Others received no payout at all, left with destroyed homes and no resources to fix them. For these families, rebuilding feels like a cruel illusion, technically possible, but financially impossible. Aid from government agencies fills some of the gap, but it is often slow and insufficient. FEMA provides emergency assistance, but the money rarely covers the true cost of rebuilding. Non-profits and churches play critical roles, offering shelter, supplies, and volunteers, but they cannot replace what entire communities lose. Survivors repeatedly emphasize that help from neighbors and strangers often arrives faster and feels more meaningful than official programs. It is in the small acts, sharing generators, cooking meals, clearing debris, that recovery begins. The psychological burden is perhaps the least visible yet most enduring impact of these storms. Survivors talk about living with constant anxiety every hurricane season. They describe sleepless nights whenever a storm is forecast, even if it is hundreds of miles away. Children develop phobias of thunder. Adults break down at the sound of heavy rain. Mental health services, already scarce, are overwhelmed in the aftermath of major hurricanes. The trauma does not fade easily. It resurfaces every time the winds pick up or the sky darkens. For many, the storm never truly ends. And yet, even within this devastation, resilience emerges. Communities rally, determined not to be defined solely by loss. Families rebuild stronger homes, invest in storm shutters, and elevate structures where possible. Some towns create new evacuation plans, while local leaders push for infrastructure upgrades to withstand future storms. Survivors, despite their pain, often express pride in their ability to endure. They tell stories not just of destruction, but of solidarity, of neighbors becoming family, of strangers arriving with chainsaws and food and staying until the work is done. Still, there is an underlying question that refuses to go away. How sustainable is this cycle of loss and rebuilding? Each storm costs billions of dollars, strains emergency systems, and drives people further into debt. Some wonder aloud if it is worth it. Is it worth rebuilding on the same vulnerable land, knowing another storm will come? Or is it time to consider retreating from the most at-risk areas, painful as that might be? For families who have lived in Florida for generations, the idea of leaving feels like abandoning their identity. For newcomers who moved seeking sunshine and opportunity, it feels like a betrayal of their dreams. Yet increasingly, both groups are confronting the reality that staying carries risks they may no longer be able to afford. The larger picture is sobering. Florida is not the only place facing this reality. Coastal communities across the United States, and indeed the world, are grappling with stronger storms fueled by warmer oceans and rising seas. What happens in Florida today will happen elsewhere tomorrow. The stories of Floridians who lost everything in one night are not just local tragedies. They are warnings of a future that could touch every coastline. As the storms intensify, the divide between those who can recover and those who cannot grows wider. Wealthier families may have savings, second homes, or the means to relocate temporarily. Poorer families, often living in the most vulnerable housing, are left stranded with little hope of rebuilding. Hurricanes, in this way, magnify existing inequalities. The storm itself does not discriminate, but the aftermath does. It is in the aftermath that the lines of privilege and poverty are laid bare. Listening to survivors, one theme emerges again and again. The storm took everything, but it did not take their voices. They want their stories told, not as tales of victimhood, but as testaments to endurance. They want the world to understand what it means to live at the edge of catastrophe, to face the prospect of losing everything each hurricane season. They want policymakers to hear them, insurers to treat them fairly, and fellow citizens to recognize that their struggle is not isolated. It is a glimpse of the challenges we all face in a changing climate. The question, then, is not only how Floridians will recover from losing everything in one night, it is also how the rest of us will respond. Will we learn from their experiences, invest in stronger infrastructure, rethink where and how we build, and take the threat of climate change seriously? Or will we look away, waiting until the next storm forces another community to tell the same story? At Crisis Lens, we believe these voices matter. We believe that the stories of loss, resilience, and survival are not only worth hearing, but essential for shaping the future. Hurricanes are not just about wind speeds and rainfall totals. They are about people, about what it means to live, lose, and rebuild in the face of forces beyond human control. If you have felt the weight of these stories, if you see the urgency they reveal, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Crisis Lens for more in-depth explorations of the crises reshaping our world. Like this video to help more people hear these voices. Share it with friends and family so that the stories of Florida's survivors are not forgotten. Together, we can ensure that their experiences guide us toward resilience, preparation, and action. The storms will keep coming. The question is whether we will be ready, not only to survive them, but to build a future where families no longer have to say, "We lost everything in one night."